And calling to order at 8:04. So first item on the agenda is approval of the October 7th, 2022 minutes.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
My apologies for being late at that meeting. I had a doctor's appointment.
No excuse.
I know, those damn CAT scans. What can you do?
Okay, and then I just put on here a brief update on the harvesting NOI. I don't know if Pat is here. I don't see Pat here, but at
I
any.
am.
Oh, you are here?
I had trouble, Roxanne, getting in on my computer, but could get in on my phone. But anyway, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, at any rate, Pat had some concerns about the harvesting and wanted to expand. Hopefully, we could expand in the next NOI what we're harvesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but I spoke with Pat and then we set up a meeting for last Tuesday, which I then couldn't be in. I couldn't even call in because I was stuck on I-90, taking my daughter to Boston. So she and Michael Canales met and had a discussion about it. Basically, the SBA has very generously offered to assist in any way, shape, or form possible within a certain dollar limit in terms of actually using their attorneys to write something up. However, as it turns out, we are limited right now to the 10 acres, and that's recreational. And apparently, Pat has been advised, and Pat can speak to this, by not only, I think, Solitude, but Mike Canales has also heard this, that if you try to go over that, then now you're talking invasives. And then that means how do we address, the water lilies? So I guess the end result of this is to proceed with what the original plan was, saying that, yes, we will do recreational harvesting, we will do up to 10 acres, and what we would like to see is that it's discretionary, that they have to trust us, that we're going to be targeting those areas that are of primary concern, and that changes from year to year, so therefore, why shouldn't it be discretionary? So Pat, do you want to add to that and give your perspective?
Yeah, I think at minimum, when we were talking, I believe last year we were harvesting either 7.2 or 7.9 acres. So we should at least be able to go up to the max of the 10 that is permitted right now. What I'm trying to understand and work on, and this is what Mike and I were talking about, and we had reached out to Tom Coote just to see what his perspective was, is there a way under a different part of the act to harvest more with the proviso that you're not permanently altering areas underwater? And Tom said didn't have an issue with that. Of course, the is always in the details about where would we do it, what would we be doing, et cetera. So assuming that the town would like to be able to harvest more than 10 acres, if we can find a way to do that, I would still like to pursue that option, do the homework, do the research, and then come back to you and to the select board and say, here's a way we think we can do it. And the way I see it, Roxanne, is that, yeah, the SBA would put together the NOI, but then it's the town that's applying for it. So we would hand it over to the town and say, you have your attorneys review it, all of this kind of stuff. I'm just saying we would do the legwork and spend the money if we think we can get more than 10 acres.
Okay, thank you.
Would this be an additional NOI? Because DEP doesn't usually like to have two filings on the same project.
No, it would be the new NOI.
Where do we stand within the 3-year opening on this?
I think
In the first or second year?
second.
Because these are usually 3-year.
It's a 3-year.
Well, this past summer was the second year.
Yeah.
I believe.
Okay.
So we have the one more year of the 10 acres
Now,
recreational.
Can we, even if we only do 10 acres, can we redo the 10? Can we redo those, like do them twice a year?
Oh, no, on a regular basis. Is anytime that you go out and you harvest, you are limited to basically 10 acres, but that can go on every day if you
Okay.
want. It isn't needed every day.
Okay.
Patrick?
Couple things. One, the reduction from 10 to 7 point whatever it was,
Well, there was no reduction.
Okay, let me
That's just
finish.
what we did.
there's a map. There's a map specifically they approved based on concerns around the snails and HESP and whatever. I think that especially based on, the LICOT study and the impact on harvesting of removing phosphorus and nitrogen, and the fact that LICOT specifically said that absent sewer expansion, harvesting was the best way to remove nutrients. It says so right on page 91. I think that there's a possibility that we could recraft an NOI more like the SBA's original NOI that they did separately, which is an ecological restoration rather than a nuisance vegetation NOI. And I think that if we're going to try to reopen this, that we should look at it as an ecological restoration, not as a revision of the nuisance harvesting permit. I think that if we're going to limit it to 10 acres, Michael and the highway department did a fine job and had managing the map this year. I think that if we want to look at expanding the map, it should be based on ecological restoration. I think that gives us the best chance of getting approved.
I just, let's be careful with how we word it, that we don't get in trouble. I'm sure before we approach NHESP or anything with a plan of how to change it, that we know exactly or hope exactly to know what their reaction is going to be in terms of, okay, if you want to do this, then these are the repercussions versus what we have for the next year. NHESP is a strange group. I mean, in a way so I'm just saying, because the first one we did, it sort of backfired on us. And so I just want us to be careful before we should really make sure that someone looks at this and says, Patrick, whatever we change, that it changes for the better.
Right, and a couple points of clarification. It's a recreational permit. It's not a nuisance, not called a nuisance vegetation permit. And we had a limit of 10 acres under the recreational maximum that we could do. The map had nothing to do with the snails. It had to do with the herbicide project by the SBA and the fact that we had to avoid certain areas. And so that's why it was 7 acres, because we were avoiding all these potential areas.
Right, okay.
Which, is no longer in play at the moment. So Mike Canales and I and I think Pat, we're all pretty hopeful that that's not an issue at this point. We can do the 10 acres and then we do not have to avoid any areas, particularly and specifically, so that we can do around the lake and down the channel.
But it adds up to a lot more than 10 acres.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends on how much they're going to limit us, but we're not going to go out there and clear cut huge areas. I mean,
We never have done that, but the current NOI, as I understand it, includes one pass down the outlet and one pass back.
yes.
There's many parts of the outlet that are wider and that in my opinion, anyway, need to include paths to docks
That is on that map.
Yeah, but like I said, as you go down the outlet, in many places, it's I think needlessly constraining. I just feel like we have a permit in place that worked last year, and if we're going to try to spend the time and money to expand it, let's expand it from the point of view of an ecological restoration, not.
Well, I would suggest that you talk to Michael Canales about it. And I do trust that the SBA will obviously put great deal of effort into exploring the possibilities and then come
Yeah.
back to us with, if they think there's some potential that we can do something that would be accepted. And that's obviously going to come back to the select board and to the town administrator. And it'll ultimately, if you guys agree to go forward, it's going to go in front of the Conservation Commission. So,
And we also have now the benefit of having Fleetwood
right,
to review these
Right.
things. And they are,
Okay.
you know, certainly, they might have some thoughts as to
right.
how we could recraft it a little bit to make it more workable
Right.
and get into the areas where people have encountered some difficulties. I mean, you know, we have to remember that when the Conservation Commission reviews something, you know, and I did, for anybody who's listening, you know, not meaning to insult, but we don't care about your recreational, because that's not our job. Our job is to look at what the environmental issues that are concerned. And that's going to be, the water lilies are a problem because they're a native species. And, but they're also a big deal in terms of the recreational aspect of people enjoying the lake. So
Right.
that's it's kind of a conflict for us to look at water lilies when we really can't.
Right. You know, that's why it's called a recreational permit, is so that it allows you to do the native species. I think Fleetwood, talking to them would be great, because I think they're going to have some insight in terms of what the, you know, ecological restoration implies invasives. Recreational implies natives. And so I think they're going to have, their insight is going to be probably very valuable in terms of, is there a way to do this? And, you know, keep in mind that what we need to do is not necessarily just expand to X number of acres, but to address problems.
Right.
That is the point, and we have to remember that. We're really trying to focus on solving certain specific issues that arise. So, you know,
Mark Stinson is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the Wetlands Protection Act, and David is more of a, I hesitate to use the word gut reaction guy, but he has a different sort of view.
right,
So between the two of them, they are awesome. I mean, they are so awesome. So I think that they can
Okay.
help us a lot.
all righty.
Roxanne?
Do we know what the status is of working with them at this point? In terms of outside of Conservation Commission and the reasons that they,
Well, if this is a project that's coming before the Conservation Commission, then we can ask them to review it.
okay,
Yeah,
Sally?
yeah.
I had sent last year, I think last year when we were having a problem, these reports on lilies, and that when they stop, sometimes they stop being actually just nuisance. They actually become detrimental to the lake when they cover over a certain amount or percentage of the area. Like we have in the outlet, very often in parts of the outlet, we have almost shore to shore lilies. And what that does to the ecological well-being of the lake is detrimental in terms of heating up the waters or whatever it is. So it's not just that they're native, but it's sort of like diminishing returns. Like there's a point when they're okay, and then there's a point when they're actually not good for the lake. I can send you that if you want. It was a whole study that was done.
That would be a point that would have to be made in the
No.
application.
Right. Okay. No problem. I just wanted to bring it up that
I
it
mean,
wasn't.
it's certainly interesting, but it would have to, you know, you have to address these things in your application, saying this is why we think that this particular method of getting rid of the lilies is important and why. You
Yeah.
know.
And we're talking really probably 10% of the lilies in the outlet that we harvest, probably 15% maybe. Right.
okay. Pat, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering from a procedural, or I'm not even sure the word I'm looking for, is how do we approach Mark and or David in terms of asking their advice? Because do I do that as the SBA? Does Sally do
No.
that as the Concom? How does that work?
It would, they would come in once there was a a notice of intent in place, or at least the bare bones of one. And then we can ask them for a peer review.
Okay, so we really can't consult with them before the NOI is done, basically to get their advice about the best way to write it?
Sure we can.
Yeah, we can, if it's done in a open meeting setting and I mean, we very often have applicants that come in and say, this is what we'd like to do. Can you tell us, is it possible?
Right. Or
And-
if there are areas of concern that we could address before we write it, yes?
Yes,
We-
but I think that you need to be partway along in
Okay.
this, so that you've got a pretty good idea of what you're going to be asking for. And then you can come in for a preliminary meeting before the notice of intent is actually filed and say, okay, so this is what we're thinking. And this is why we're thinking it, and can you review it? And I think that we could proceed that way.
I just will point out that limitation is based on a contract to review specific notice of intents for the Conservation Commission. There's no reason we cannot inquire about budget availability to have them separately assist us in crafting the NOI. We are not limited to
Well,
using
there's-
them.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
no reason to keep Michael Canales, say, from contacting them and finding out, is there a cost involved? And then
Yeah, if it's
allocating
$1,000 we
funds,
can look for it.
just as a consultant to the town administration.
Right.
Yes, although, wait, I'm not sure that doesn't get into a conflict. We'd have to be careful of that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. On their
Yeah.
part, there might be a
Mike
conflict
can
for them.
check with
Yeah.
Well,
town.
then you might, look, you might not be able to use them on the back end.
It's all the same project, I understand that, but if they're consulting on this end, can they then
Yeah, I
consult
see what
on
you're
this
saying.
end?
Okay.
So I think what I suggested is probably the simplest way to go about it is to, and then if the town wants to kick in extra funds because it starts to exceed our allocation, then that might be something.
I think that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that your take on it is the safest way to go, actually.
All right.
All right. So any other questions and comments on this topic? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to reviewing the draft, hopefully the final draft of the Lake and Watershed Management Plan. And I know I got something from you, Sally, but I haven't seen it yet because it came in late last night.
Yes, it did.
So,
I had a night with no children and no husband and no anything to actually review. So I had a few comments. I have it on my computer just so you don't have
see if
to
I can do a share screen.
fiddle around with it. So on page
Hang on.
3, once again, it's inconsistent throughout this document when they define their and not anagram, what's the word I want? When you make, I was out late, I was doing it late last night and my brain is gone. When you have like the initials of the thing. So it's inconsistent. There's a word for that. It's inconsistent throughout the document when they define their abbreviations.
Yeah,
So on page 2, it says this WBP, the first year, it's the first time that abbreviation is used. And I think that it should be in parentheses, water-based plan. Because I think, people are going to go, huh, what's that? And then they're going to go back and the minute they have to start going back to look and see what that means, you've lost them.
right.
So that's page 3.
I got this up. I hate it when I'm not on my own computer. Trying to navigate. I put these on the desktop, but I don't see a way to navigate to my desktop from here.
To share it?
Yeah,
Uh,
hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on one sec. There's the file.
So that's within the executive summary, if anybody has the document. And it's on page 3.
All right.
Sally, I had to look for that too, but I found it under watershed management plan.
Right, so under executive summary, the
591.
second paragraph starts with, this WBP provides a cohesive overview of the previous studies performed on the lake. And I think because it's the first use of WBP in this document, that it should be defined in parentheses, that is the water-based plan.
Oh.
So, well, basically, yeah, I noticed the same thing, is that it isn't consistent.
And it isn't consistent throughout, that sometimes they define it and sometimes they don't define it.
Well,
I
usually,
think people get lost.
okay, but normally what you do is your first occurrence of something, you spell it out and then parentheses, you put your abbreviation.
Yeah,
And then after that, you use the abbreviation.
right, but they didn't do that. So
Okay.
Just, that.
So let's fix that. So that's pretty simple.
So, and then on the next page, which maybe 4, maybe that was 2, they talk about the water chestnut, but they don't tell you what it is. They use the scientific name, the Trapanatans, and they don't say that that's water chestnut. So people aren't going to know. I mean, they've been used to seeing the scientific name for the Eurasian milfoil,
Yep.
but actually, I'm not
So
sure.
it's just a matter of consistency, both with the
Right.
abbreviations and also then with the use of the common name as well as.
Right.
Okay.
And was I going to say something about that? Also, it's not consistent throughout the document whether the M is capitalized or not.
Oh,
And sometimes,
an M spiccatum, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, well, I think it's supposed to be capitalized, is it not?
sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't.
Okay.
Come on.
All right, and then as you go down farther in that, on page 4,
Okay.
it says, in sum, this comprehensive water-based lake management plan, and I think it should say in summary. It's just before you get to the,
Page 4, in sum,
yeah,
should be summary.
yeah.
Okay.
You have my
Yeah.
notes and the markups should be visible.
It's only giving me Google Drive, Microsoft Drive, Dropbox. This is not helpful.
All right, let's see. I mean, I didn't have a lot, but there were a few things that I
Okay.
thought were strange.
Well, those are all
Those are simple.
Just
simple things. Okay. Anything substantive?
Yeah, I'd like to talk.
There were a couple.
Okay, what did you have?
Gotta
Sally?
go down. Where am I? Let's see.
All right, screen sharing, but that's not what I want to screen share. Where is it? I closed it. Do not understand this computer.
All right, and let's see, in the top of page 18, it said something like, it said A utility transmission lines run perpendicular. So I thought it should say just utility transmission lines
Okay,
run perpendicular.
this is page 18?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. A transmission line, okay. Strike the A, okay.
All right, so Shadow Brook and Duck Pond Brook are both defined as perennial streams, rivers under the Wetlands Protection Act, to indicate that they do not in fact dry up except in extreme circumstance.
Is this an addition or?
Well, it says that they dry up. These streams are prone to drying up during summer months and only run during storm events while Lily Brook runs all year. That would defy the definition of a perennial stream.
Right, and I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, I don't
In
know.
extreme conditions, they do dry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that was my point, that I
Okay.
don't think we should say that they are prone to drying up during summer months.
okay,
And which are those?
Shadow Brook and Duck Pond Brook.
on Brook.
This is Duck Pond.
Duck Pond goes from Interlake and Crossroads in through Beechwood.
Oh, okay.
Like, in other words, this year, we had them dry except for
Yeah.
one. However, that's not usual.
That's not usual, right? So I think we need to not.
What's
say
it
that.
defined on the map as perennial streams? So
Yeah, say they might, it's possible that they would dry up during an extreme drought situation. And then again, they talk about Berkshire Country Day School. This is in the next paragraph. BCD does not border the lake. They do not have land that goes down to the lake. So I don't know why it keeps getting put in there.
Don't they have a parcel of land that goes down?
No,
I thought they used to.
they might have.
it was
I mean,
Peter Williams' house.
Peter Williams' house used to be the boathouse for the Shadowbrook estate.
Okay,
And then it was owned by BCD and they sold it to Peter's father.
Right.
okay, so where is this, Sally? What page?
This is just below that. So it's
Okay.
on page
19?
8. I think it's still 18, but I could be 19.
And we were-
Next paragraph.
Holly?
Where it talks about watershed is characterized by light to medium density residential housing. And then it says, the northern portion of the immediate lake shoreline is occupied by large tracts of land, including the lake boat launch and parking lot, Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, Berkshire Country Day School, Camp Mackinac, Gould Meadows. Berkshire Country Day School does not have shoreline property.
Okay,
All right, so then in the insert, the Housatonic River Watershed 2002 Water Quality Assessment Report. We need to define DWM.
DWM,
Yeah,
okay.
which wildlife management, Division of Wildlife Management, I don't know. So,
We'll get clarification.
Is it a kind of music?
all right, so and then the next paragraph in that assessment report, Town of Stockbridge has been trying to draw down water levels in the bowl for 5 years for management of aquatic plant species. 1 year, leaves clogged the outlet, allowing a tiny trickle to Larry Ward Brook. That is in absolute violation of the permit.
That never happened.
They're
That's been cleaned all the time.
just saying, that's what it says.
Okay, I don't know where that came from.
So we need to be really careful. I gave Michael the document on what, there's a monitoring station downstream that Shep Evans used to monitor. I don't know if he still does. That tells what the stream flow is into Larry Wog Brook. And that has to be maintained, and a tiny trickle does not cut it from
Okay,
a environmental standpoint, because it means that you're drying up Larry Wog Brook and everything in it.
right.
So,
But
do you know where
what
that
page
is?
is that on?
Do we know where that is?
It used to be on the bridge abutment rate. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, down at it's near the,
But I think it got damaged during one of the, really big deluges, and I think he moved it. This is years ago.
yeah.
So what page is this on?
Nobody's monitoring this until it's any good anyway.
It says 18,
We gotta ask
but
Shep
I'm
if
not
it's
sure
still
that's
active. I don't
correct.
think it is.
It's the Housatonic, it's an insert,
Sorry, I'm
it's one
late,
of
guys.
those bright blue inserts, the Housatonic River Watershed 2000.
It's all part of that report?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, Patrick.
So it says, and then in that same document, it says sports day camp. It was sports school day camp.
Oh, that's a copy of my thing. Yeah, right here. Thank you.
talks about the camp.
Yeah, there are 9 bathing beaches on the shores of Stockbridge Bowl.
Right, except that is a previous report.
I understand that, but it's wrong. I mean, I
Okay,
don't know.
well, it might have been right if it was 2002 report. It
Oh, it
was,
was the sports school day camp,
right, way back when.
right.
But so.
But they call it wait, what do they call it? They call it sports day camp. It was sports school day camp.
Okay, it's just the name that you're taking issue with.
Yes.
Okay,
All right, and then it's not giving me a new page. It must be a new page though. All right, so then when you go down to where it starts, the paragraph starts, the phase dash zebra mussel study conducted in 2009 sought to identify those lakes that posed a higher risk of zebra mussel infestation in Berkshire County. And halfway through that paragraph, they rattle off a bunch of scientific names, which I think need to be defined.
okay,
I mean, we've already defined the Eurasian milfoil, but the others, no. And then the next sentence after that, again, scientific names, no common names.
okay.
I mean, I think this needs to be readable by anybody who's interested.
Right,
Doesn't have to go back to Google and say, what is that?
right. Well, and it should be consistent throughout.
Right. All right, then. Down further, and John, you may be able to help with this. Massachusetts surface water quality standards. It still says page 18. I'm sure that's wrong. Because it is, I think it's page 24. Stockbridge Bowl is a Class B water body. What does that mean? If you don't know, they're all in trouble.
I don't know.
B is for bowl, isn't it?
B is for both.
I don't think so.
Class B water.
So I mean, so there's a whole thing on Massachusetts surface water quality standards. And it says that Stockbridge Bowl is a Class B water body. And then she gives this little chart that says that it's how it's classified. But what is a Class B water body? It would be probably helpful to know.
Yeah, well, it's right.
And I think I tried finding that once, actually. This just spurred my memory, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think it would be good to know what that means. They've defined what they mean by other things, but they didn't define that. It's not defined. So it would just be, what are the ramifications of being a Class B water body? All right, so then on page 29, this one just made me scratch my head. Watershed impervious cover, such as paved roads, parking lots, roofs, basketball courts. Now, in my opinion, there is one basketball court on the entire lake. So why did they call that out?
I don't know, because why can't they just say paved surfaces?
I just thought that was so peculiar. I mean, I think the camp has a basketball court and maybe somebody has one in their driveway, but I don't think that is such a
Right.
prevalent feature of things around the lake that you would want to say.
Right, that or even tennis courts. If you had a paved tennis court, just say paved surfaces.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought that was weird.
How pickleball? Are those back to the market?
Yeah, everything's getting all
Like
the tennis courts are now going to be pickleball. And one thing that I found odd, this is on page 33, is throughout all these things, highway is 0, and I don't understand that. Pollutant loading. This is a table about pollutant loading. And there are a couple of instances where highway is listed as 0. And I don't know how that can be if you're talking about pollutant loading, because there are
I asked that question once.
all kinds of,
And I think it was that it was insignificant enough that they don't
Salt?
count it.
between salt and
Yeah, but you think about how much we have
oil, yeah.
that's particularly close. It's really just the causeway. Everything else, the impact is mitigated. I mean,
It's,
the roadways are far enough away from the water, with the exception of like the causeway.
Have you watched the causeway and during a big storm event? It comes all the way down that hill from both sides
Yeah.
and converges on the causeway and goes right into the lake.
Yeah.
It's really sort of terrifying. And I don't know whether highway it would be considered highway, but the boat ramp is,
that's,
Boat ramp is,
there's, it's.
I would think the boat ramp is
salted and there are.
and then the causeway,
cars,
actually.
There are,
Yeah.
all those things. I just couldn't understand why it was 0.
Okay.
who would know about,
I don't
would that be Buff? Would he know anything?
Yeah, maybe. All right, so page 34 at the top in the insert, again, short-term estimate model endpoints, nutrient loading for Stockbridge Bowl from extrapolation. What is Mohican Brook? Does anybody know? Me either, but there it is, right at the top of the thing.
Okay.
Along with Shadow Brook, Crapala Beach Inlet, Lily Brook, and Duck Pond Brook.
Could that be the brook that comes down through Bullard Woods?
I don't know.
I don't know. You don't have a name?
Well, we'll find out. I'll ask where that came from.
Yeah, I don't
Who
know.
knows? It could be a remnant from somebody else's
Yeah.
lake management plan that didn't get changed, deleted.
Not to the best of my knowledge, a perennial stream. Could be, but I don't know what it is.
Mohican Brook, they're
Yeah.
saying it's perennial.
I don't know. It's just.
Well, let's find out what they mean.
It's mentioned in this table right at the top of the list. And I didn't know what it was and I thought
Mohican or Mohican?
Mohican.
Mohican.
I think that's the one that comes off the,
Bullard Woods.
up, through Bullard Woods, Tanglewood, and it extends up into, the swamp that's way up there.
It may be, but I've not seen it named
Yeah.
before.
And I don't think it's perennial. If that is
No,
what you're thinking, it's not
No,
perennial.
it's over on 183. It's right there. By the Mackinac Boat Club.
Oh,
It's certainly
Just
not
south of the boat club.
south of the boat club?
It says Mohican Brook. I'm just showing you the map.
Really? Interesting. Okay. It's not perennial, if it is,
Yeah. Who knows?
anyway.
I don't know.
So on page 35, at the bottom of that paragraph, it's this really threw me. It says, this occurs due to respiration on the bottom of the lake increases amounts of dissolved CO2. And I read that and I said, what does that
what does it mean?
I think there's a that or a which missing that would make that make sense.
Okay.
This occurs due to respiration on the bottom of the lake that increases amounts of dissolved CO2. Or which increases,
Okay.
or something, because it just didn't, I went, I don't know what that means.
Well, that's a question for them.
Okay, page. $39, I think.
Okay.
It says, we're talking about a further detailed study of the, and I think it should be extent of anoxia will improve understanding and assist in selecting the best option to pursue from the list above. And I thought at that point, we should mention that the removal of plant material via harvesting certainly contributes to the lessening of nutrient loading due to dead and dying material.
Okay.
Oh, and somewhere in here, I thought, and I put the note under the BMP hotspot map, which is page 40. The note doesn't have to go there, but I thought we should somehow mention the proliferation of Phragmites and other, I didn't say other invasive species, but we have, I mean, everywhere we go around the lake at the Conservation Commission, we deal with the proliferation of invasive species. I mean, there's buckthorn, there's bittersweet, and, not so much purple loosestrife, which is interesting, but the Phragmites certainly in Lily Pond are.
Burning bushes all over there too.
Yeah, somehow that should be part of our lake management, I think, is the removal of the land-based invasive species.
Okay.
Barbary bush has gotten, I guess you guys are gonna think about addressing the Barbary bush at Bullard Woods. There's just so much of it.
Bullard Woods is just infested
Yeah.
with barberry. And if people need a reason to want to get rid of it, it harbors ticks.
Well, it also kill it. It
Says something.
keeps everything else out. It's so efficient.
But the ticks, the mice live under the bushes because they're safe. It's like Brer Rabbit's.
Yeah.
And so then the ticks
No.
go with the.
Who's told me, Pat, that is actually on the plan for the SBA.
I've been talking about that with SBA for years, that they really need to address that. And now it's creeping into Gould Meadows too, which didn't used to have any.
Patrick, you're right. Moose is working on it and he's working with Jess Toro. Doesn't come cheap, but it needs to be done. Totally agree.
Do a CPC grant. Can we do-
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Seriously.
Yeah.
No, I am taking that advice seriously.
Yes, you should.
Thank you.
And so then on page 41, there's the matrix for BMP hotspot map. And I was just confused by the figures. Is the parcel a school, fire station, police station, town hall, or library? And it said yes, and it had the number 5 under it. And I looked at that and said, I don't understand what that means.
Okay.
Why does it 5? And then the next one is the parcels use code in the 900 series, i.e. public property or university ownership. Again, yes, with the number 5.
Number of parcels?
Which I would believe
Yeah.
public property. But why in the one above it is the parcel a school, fire station, police station, town hall, or library? Why does it say 5?
I don't know. We can get answers for that.
I don't know. I don't know where that came from. Get to the end. Okay. On page 46, I think. And then when it lists the things that one can do to, the public outreach will be undertaken to increase awareness of landscaping best management practices. The last one, the instance that they use, it is required to use native species within regulated areas under the Wetlands Protection Act is the only full sentence in that grouping.
So we have incomplete sentences.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Bullets, right.
it's just bullets. And I just thought it was odd. That's my editor.
Probably because my guess is that's something that in a previous meeting we talked about.
Yes, no, I don't have
Give it to them,
I don't
so-
have a problem with the language. It's just that it struck me that it was really different from the other things.
Okay, so it should be consistent again.
Yeah,
Like bulleted point.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so page 48. There is another table C2, Stockbridge Bowl Strategy Summary by Management Area. And it keeps talking about Mackinac Lake Road. It is not Mackinac Lake Road, it's Mackinac Road.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and then it talks about in the next grouping, which is page 49. They're talking about lake level drawdown. One of the reasons, or the reason that the drawdowns are not being routinely permitted anymore is not mentioned, which is that it has a negative impact on freshwater mussels. And the freshwater mussels, their growth is stunted and I wrote, drawdowns have been shown to negatively impact freshwater mussels. The result is stunting their growth, leading to less functionality in clearing the water of particulates.
Okay. And that's
Then-
in what you sent me, right?
That's in what I said.
Okay, good.
So then the next one is. Okay, so the use of herbicides in that next thing. One of the questions that we had from the Conservation Commission is that the reports that list what the herbicides do does not, there's no data on the impact on a number of critters, including the snails. But there are crustaceans and other critters that live in the lake that there's no data to support whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing for them.
Right.
Under hydro waking. I'm sorry, it's under benthic barriers. The note came up in the wrong place. One of the things that we dealt with a few years ago when we were talking about benthic barriers is it can negatively impact fish and bottom dwelling invertebrates and macroinvertebrates.
Makes sense. You're putting that down, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can be used sporadically and because, you could use it here next to your dock and it would be fine for a year and you would get rid of the invasive species plants. But the stuff underneath it could die because it has no access to the lake or oxygen or anything else. And it would take away fish breeding grounds by putting down a benthic
Are
barrier.
there any kind of guidelines to determine, where the tipping point is?
It's really spotty. When people have come before us to ask about it, we looked it up and we've tried to think about it, and we permitted it on a pond, a hole that kind of was up on Yale Hill. But it's never been proposed as being used on the lake, so I don't know, benthic barriers. I think they might have their place in certain areas,
That
but,
may be another area that more research,
right, exactly.
data should be collected about that.
Yeah. So then, on page 52, target audience. I didn't understand why it said appropriate stakeholders.
What? Missed that.
What are inappropriate stakeholders? I don't know.
Okay, we'll have that word stricken.
I mean, if you've been running naked through the fields, are you no longer inappropriate?
We had that, didn't we?
That was it. That was it.
Like that.
Great, thank you. All right. Patrick, you had some comments?
Yeah, I think the entire lake management plan mentions the word climate twice and in passing. I think we need to ask the question about whether climate resiliency and climate change impacts are going to impact this. I think it's both a good idea for the stewardship of the lake. I also know it's a good idea from the point of view of approaching grant makers because there's a lot of climate money out there. As an example, yesterday, we got some guidance from Carrie Ann Petrick at MVP, and she had some specific suggestions where she thought that we could solicit funding specifically potentially around some of the monitoring and educational efforts. But she also had some federal grant makers who might be able to help us with dredging. So, I just think, I think though that there has to be a narrative somewhere in town. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the lake management plan, but if we're kind of speaking with one voice, it would certainly help, make the case that we're serious about climate when we're focusing on these, billions of dollars in climate money that's out there.
Right.
So, I wrote something up myself, which is not vetted and is not at all potentially what we want to go with.
You have a copy for me?
Yeah, I did. No, is that one of the staple?
Got
Yeah.
it.
And I also sent it to your email. But it's just basically just something like that. Maybe run it by GZA, and just try to figure out how we repackage a lot of what we're doing into kind of a climate narrative, I guess. There's nothing new in here, so to speak. It's just more about focus and saying, yeah, we care about this.
Well, and I think it makes a lot of sense to have a full paragraph that actually addresses the fact that this is a living document and that this will be reviewed annually.
Yeah.
And touch on all the points of why that's necessary. And climate change, climate resiliency is one among many others. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, your circumstances change every year.
Yeah, sure. I'm just making the point that there's grant money available in this area.
Right.
And, and I think we're going to need it.
Right.
So.
Okay,
Well, I think the point needs to be made, and when you're talking about climate, is look at this weather. I mean, we now have had, or will have had, 2 weeks of weather where it's in the 60s and broaching the 70s
yeah.
in November. I had a pop-up on my Facebook page about a month, 3 weeks ago, of our field with snow. And I remember as a kid,
Yep.
when my family used to get together every Columbus Day weekend and walk up to the caves up behind our house. And it was not infrequent that there was snow that weekend. So we're seeing longer summers. And that's going to change the temperature in the lake, which is going to change its habitat capability and a bunch of other things.
And also increase the risk for cyanobacteria, which is my personal big concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I sent you a document of the Conservation Commission concerns because you asked me to do that. Of course, I did it last night, but so use of chemicals is number one, especially fertilizer, including organic, because I don't think people understand that organic fertilizer has the same impact on the lake as any other kind of fertilizer because it helps things grow. And the landscape around the lake is such a bowl that during rain events, everything washes into the lake. Why spend vast sums of money in an attempt to remove invasive species while at the same time contributing to their growth? The use of salts on roads and driveways. Salinization is a huge concern. What is the tipping point for when the lake is no longer habitable? I've come back to the fact that Mirror Lake, which is Lake Placid, did not turn over for 2 or 3 years in a row because due to the salt
Really?
impact. Yeah, it was really bad. And they're working diligently to try and help that. And I know that Hugh has been, and the town have been working on the amount of salt that they're using on the roads. But people use salt on their driveways, and that goes into the lake also. And the fact that many of the houses are now full-time houses rather than just one-season cottages means that the impact of that is going to be more significant of people just using their houses. My next, that was overdevelopment leads to changes in the environment, including temperature changes, habitat loss, increased runoff, and more. While possibly an unpopular view, more should be considered regarding the intense use of the land. Limitations on build-outs should be considered. There are regulations in many towns that permit, I was just watching Maine Cabin Masters the other night, where one town that they were in only permits you to increase the size of your house by a certain percentage. Just something to think about. Tree health must be a priority. With the many threats to our tree population, the woolly adelgid, the emerald ash borer, the spotted lanternfly, needle casting, etc., the landscaping of the lake is under threats. Trees help cool the water, absorb pollutants, hold bank against erosion, and more. At least a 1-to-1 replanting of native species is required, standard practice. When a tree, even a dead or diseased one, people don't know that, is taken down, mature trees may require a higher ratio because the trees are dying. And people understandably want to take them down because they don't want them to fall on the house. They don't want to have to take them out of but those trees are gone. And that's a big deal. The 35-foot vegetated buffer required by the LPOD should be a priority for all landowners around the lake. This vegetation preserves the bank, discourages geese, protects wildlife and habitat, filters out pollution, and traps stormwater and more. So having your lawn go down to the lake is not an environmentally good thing. It's also in violation of the LPOD, but there are a bunch of houses that have had it that way forever. Just because you've had it that way forever and it's allowed because it's grandfathered doesn't mean it's a good idea, and you shouldn't revisit that as a landowner. Homeowners must understand their role as stewards of this precious resource. The complex nature of the ecosystem needs to be protected and nourished. Vigilance to protect the introduction of additional invasive species, both flora and fauna. Respect for the procedures and protections of processes that are in place, the Wetlands Protection Act, the Town of Stockbridge Wetland Bylaw, the Town of Stockbridge Stormwater Bylaw, and the tenets of the Town of Stockbridge Lake and Pond Overlay District. Conservation Commission is tasked with upholding these regulations. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions before they undertake any projects within 200 feet of the lake. The commission always welcomes the public to attend meetings on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Don't do something before you come in. You just have to come in and ask, and we'll say, yes, you can do this. No, you shouldn't do this. Yes, you can do that if you do this. You know, we are always happy to provide guidance to people to avoid getting into trouble. Docs require filing for a Chapter 91 license. Under town's zoning bylaws, docks may not exceed 200 square feet unless grandfathered. Changing climate conditions need to be taken into account when considering future bylaws, building regulations, zoning, etc. Lakefront properties that have beaches must practice net zero siltation. Erosion of sand into the lake must be controlled, and the addition of new sand is prohibited unless permitted. Habitat of the critters that also live on and around the lake must be protected, and fencing and other barriers to wildlife passage are prohibited.
Okay. Wonderful, thank you. Okay,
Say anything about the section 91 of the conservation's requirements are?
Chapter 91.
But don't you have your own?
The docks are under zoning.
Okay.
yeah,
We always, when we get a plan, we always remind people of that they have to. But there's a property down on the outlet in a particularly narrow part of the channel. And I probably should have put that in, that there's a regulation which I've never been able to find again. That are waters of the, I don't know, waters, federal waters regulations or something like that. Which have to do navigable waters, which have to do with, there are all kinds of prohibitions under navigable water regulations. And one of the things that concerns me on the outlet is in the particularly narrow sections, if you had two landowners put their 200 square foot docks out, you've just narrowed the outlet to an almost impassable waterway at that point. And there's supposed to be 125 feet from the end of the dock to the other bank. But if you've got 50 feet of that being taken up by docks, that's a lot. Something to consider.
I don't know if you
Well, that
mentioned,
might
but
be a potential suggestion for a bylaw change. So,
But all of these things need to be considered, or not all of them, but many of these things I think need to be considered in terms of bylaw changes.
yeah, exactly. I think there's a whole list of them
You
there.
suddenly realized, that, oops,
Right.
this didn't work out very
Right.
well.
Exactly.
Emily,
Yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to let you know that situation almost came about and it cut into the ability of the harvester to get through.
exactly.
And the neighbors were more than willing to change where they put the, at the time. I mean, it's a good thing that area where you're saying is being addressed. I thank you for doing that. The neighbors where you're talking about where that rock is, they agreed to put their boat all the way near the shore so it wouldn't be out there. But maybe it should be addressed, or whoever lives there. But I think so far they've all been accommodating to let as much room to go through if you go down there.
Right. No, it's not a problem at the moment.
Yeah.
But
But
potentially.
a new owner may not be so accommodating. You're right.
And that's another point. If you have your dock and you have your pontoon boat, and the harvester's trying to get through,
Yep.
they may not be able to.
So far, they've been accommodating.
Yeah.
I just would also point out that there seems to be a proliferation of nighttime outdoor lights in some parts of the bowl. And I think that night skies are really important for a whole lot of reasons, bats among them.
Can I interrupt a second? Can we just keep on the changes for this thing? And then make commentary, because I have to go. I have a car parked that cost me here in the city more than my mortgage.
All
Well,
right.
I think we're
But
done.
I don't mean to interrupt you,
Haven't heard
Patrick.
from Michael yet. So,
I think we're done. I mean, I'm done with changes. I was asked to comment on what our concerns were for the Conservation Commission, and that's what I did.
And Sally, I have an answer for you regarding Class B.
Okay.
Yeah, so it appears that the Class B is given to an inland body of water as opposed to a coastal. And according to this, the CMR, which is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts classification, the Class B is given to high-quality waters, and Class A is actually a reservoir. So it's where public water is drawn from, and Class B is one step below that. And then after that comes coastal waters, which of course would have a different designation altogether. So Class B is high-quality water, but it's not the water that's diverted to the drinking public water.
Right.
That's Class A. So that would mean the reservoir.
Great. Thanks, John.
thank you. So, Michael Nathan, did you have changes to the draft?
Yes, well, I didn't have so much change. Yeah, I do.
Comments?
Not corrections, but more observations that I sent you. And I didn't send it to everybody because I didn't know how that worked. I always get criticized for open law things, so I didn't know if I could send it to everybody, but I sent it to you, Roxanne.
Okay.
I'd like to start first with, it says, I put here in the first thing, in the first line of the executive summary, it says here, do you, Lake Mackinac, commonly known as Stockbridge Bowl, is a robust ecosystem and beautiful natural resources for Stockbridge residents. I wanted to add that it's not just for Stockbridge residents. I put, and the Berkshire community at large, including Lenox, Lee, Pittsfield. It's very important that we realize that this bowl is not just for Stockbridge. It is used by the whole community, and I think it makes it a much more important body of water or a more important natural resource for the community at large for many reasons, when we want to raise money or when we want to make a point about how important this body of water to keep it healthy is for our whole community.
Right. Well, Michael, at some point we had beefed up a whole section about this, and we'd been fairly specific because it's not even just here. It's not just Massachusetts. People come from other states. So this
Right,
is,
but
you
so I
know,
want to put that in.
yeah, but I thought we had verbiage in here. So I'm going to have to go through this.
We do.
It's somewhere else. Maybe it just
But
needs.
we're talking, this is the
beefed up.
executive summary. This is the most
Exactly.
important thing
But
that
I
you're going to
can lift-
read.
But that can be lifted from where we do have it included
Okay.
and
All
make
right,
sure
I'm
that
just
it-
giving my comments, so one can
Yeah.
decide wherever I just think that the first page
No, I
is.
think that's a good point. It needs to be in the executive summary because that's really what they're creating for public consumption primarily. That may be as far as many people read.
You're right. You're right. On page 1, I wrote, among the most important lake management priorities. Is this up on the, are people looking at, do you have this up?
No, I don't have it up right now.
Oh, okay, well, what I did was I wrote, okay, in page 1, among the most important lake management priorities, blah, 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 the currently being planned involves a dredging of select areas of the lake to improve recreational use, remove nuisance plant densities, and improve habitat qualities. I have here, I observed, however, no mention of why we need to dredge. The most important reason is because of the silting in of the lake and the repercussions that a bog or wetlands could mean to the whole lake if this happens. I think the whole issue in many ways is that we're dredging to keep the waterways and the outlet free of flow as much as we are for recreation or for whatever it is that we have in here. And I think that should be added in. I mean, this is just a suggestion. The bowl is in great danger of unnatural eutrophication, and this will create a bog or wetlands potential. And I put Sea Lily Brook issue, and we don't want that to happen in the outlet.
Okay.
Just however you want to word it, but I thought it was important. On page 11.
Where was that, Michael?
In the executive summary,
No, in page 1, I apologize.
page 1.
Page 1. Sally, Roxanne, could you put the,
Well, I was trying to, and I can't figure out on this computer. I can do the
Okay.
share screen, but I can't find
nope, all right,
a way to
I'll
get to
try to-
those files
yeah.
other
I'll
than
try-
putting them in Dropbox, which I don't even know if we have an account.
Right. And we can go over this, Roxanne, or whatever. Page 11. I have here GZA, geo-environmental, blah, blah, blah. But there's no mention of the NHESP placing a restriction on lowering the bulk winter drawdown to 1.9. It's not mentioned that I saw that we're only allowed to, as a matter of fact, and as a matter of letting the people know that the winter drawdown can only go down to 1.9 feet.
But we haven't.
don't have a winter drawdown.
But we're not
There's no
doing
winter
drawdowns.
I apologize, what?
There's no winter drawdown anymore. We haven't permitted it.
Right, I'm just stating a fact. Whether we do that, we're doing it in excess of what they allow us to do. On page 23, you know, the problem is it's really hard unless I have it in front of me. So let me get,
Your pages don't seem to be the same as mine.
everybody out there in the public, bear with me. I don't know if anybody's following me because it's hard unless you see it in front of you where
Well,
the images are.
I get what you're saying. I just,
Yeah. On page 23 in the box, category 5, category 5 pollutants. There's a box, the last box. And I think in there should be the silting in of the lake bog not mentioned. I keep coming back to that because that's really like the artery of our lake. That is,
what are you looking at? Page what?
page 23.
Yes, the category
Category
5
five.
waters listed
Yeah, it
alphabetically.
says pollutant addressed by what is TMDL? I hope I'm not.
TMDL.
TMDL.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. Does he want to share his screen?
Yeah, I would love to.
Well, go ahead. I made you a co-host.
Oh, well, that's easier said than done because I've never
Oh.
shared a screen,
Oh,
but,
okay. Well, if you could do it, there you go.
oh, okay.
Can't figure out how to access it here, and I've done it before.
I know, I heard you couldn't access, so I didn't, but.
Yeah,
Not this
Roxanne,
computer,
if you
yeah.
can put it up.
But I can't. I can't figure out on this particular computer how to get to those files to
No,
share them.
you sent it out. It's your.
No,
it's
I know that. I
Oh,
know that, but it isn't resident. I've downloaded it here, but when I do the share screen, the options I'm getting does not let me go to, say, my
All right, let me
desktop,
try it.
my downloads. So it only lets me go to like Dropbox and,
Okay, hold on a second. Let me try to do that. So where do I share the share screen? Oh, share screen, I see.
category 5 means water required, TMDL.
And you have to choose the file.
Yeah, it says desktop,
Can't get to it.
mine,
Fine.
but it has a blue.
TMDL is total maximum daily loads, by the way.
Yeah, the fact that Michael has to go back and look for it is
Yeah, I
problem.
apologize, but I think this is sort of
Because it's
important.
used throughout the whole document.
What?
I said the fact that you have to go back and look for what that, the TDML means is, as someone who has gone through this 100 times, means that the average person reading it for the first time is going to be in trouble.
Well, let me just say one thing. So anyway, so in this square, in this part, it says pollutants addressed by TMDL. It says Eurasian milfoil, dissolved oxygen, mercury, and fish issues. I really think silting or whatever it is, silting in of the lake or bog not mentioned. And I think it's a major issue. But on the next page, I had the same question that Sally had, was what is B? So we addressed that. On page 25, I wish I could get this up. On page 25, we have the watershed in the number 1 watershed.
Yep.
It says, further, the sedimentation at Lilybrook Inlet is largely due to the infilling of the sedimentation pond basin, which was allowed to infill in the 1990s and now considered wetlands. These are current plans to dredge and then there are current plans to dredge the outlet channel. It's sort of, I'm not sure how it goes in there, but I think it should be, it maybe needs this situation as in Lilybrook could happen in outlet and then move up into the island or into larger bodies of water. And therefore there are current plans to dredge the outlet, something that relates to Lily Pond and the sedimentation of allowing it to infill. Something, I don't know exactly how you want to word it, but these are just my observations of when people read this, that they realize the importance of this plan.
All right, so page 25,
Yeah.
under number 1 watershed, and it's the second paragraph.
A watershed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the
number 1
very end.
watershed, and it's the second paragraph under that category.
Yeah, the very end of that. It
Got
just says, it's just a sentence. There are current plans to dredge the outlet channel, as if it's like there was no
Right.
real reason where they gave an issue for Lily Pond
Right.
or
I
Lily
got it.
Brook.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, page 26, we're talking about priorities. It says in 26, you have the priorities. It says, it's underlined, out of the potential management targets outlined, the SBSC are currently prioritizing the following water quality goals. And then it says, and it gives a list, and it says additional identified goals. And it's only there that we have protection of natives, sediment removal. But I thought when we voted that our primary goal was the restoration project. And it's sort of like an additional or a secondary, it seems like in this.
No, well, we've talked about this before. And basically, the first part of that is specifically water quality goals. The next section says additional identified goals related to environmental health and recreational safety include. So you're talking 2 different categories here.
Yeah, okay. I just think that a bog and a intrusion on flow and water heat and oxygenation and all that is not so much recreation. Well, I guess it's related to environmental health, but I really think it's bigger than that. You know, it's bigger than recreation. It's almost a water quality to a point. That's just my opinion, but if we voted on that and that's the way it is, I'm just giving you my heads up of what I saw.
But this is not, I mean, the other thing is that these are not numbered priorities either. They're just bullet points. So they're not numbered.
No, I understand that. What I was concerned was it says additional. In other words, instead
Right.
of additional to me seems like secondary. But that's just the way I read it.
Well, I can take the word additional out of there if that helps.
Well, okay.
I'll take out that word because then it's like not saying, it's just a different category in my mind.
Right.
So, but I can take the word additional out, which makes it, I think, more clear that you've got 2 different classes
Right.
here.
Right. I think that's a better way of, I personally think it gives it just as much importance.
Okay, but I don't even see dredging in here. Is it, where did
Well,
we?
the
put
second one is sediment removal
Removal.
Okay,
and dredging. One of the things, yeah.
because,
in
I
it,
mean, the reason, unless we can make an argument for and explain how that impacts water quality. And I think that was the issue here is, I don't care where we put it, really, because this is not a priority list. This is just bullet points. So the first section, when we talked about it before, those are all very specific to water quality. And dredging, if you can make the argument that that has to do with the water quality, then that's fine. We put it up in
Right,
the
no.
category, you know.
Well, we're talking environmental health and, right.
Right. So that's why it's in a separate spot. That's the
that's
only
I think removing additional works great.
for you?
Yeah, for what?
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. I don't want to make it secondary. And in that sentence where it says sediment removal to improve, I really think it should be, it's not just to improve endangered and threatened species. I mean, it's really to improve the what, to keep it from becoming wetlands where it would be a disaster for the rest of the
Okay.
wetland eventually.
Well, should we add to prevent?
Sally, what do you think of?
What do you think,
I
Sal?
think that eutrophication is a natural process.
But this is not a natural eutrophication.
I understand.
Yeah.
But it is a natural process and all lakes and ponds go through it to some degree or another.
Right.
And it's part of the changing environment. So this is an artificial act
Right.
that we are undertaking for
A restoration.
whatever reasons we feel that it's necessary to do that.
Right.
So it doesn't. It isn't really, it's contrary to the nature of things.
You know, death is a natural act.
I'm not saying it's
Somebody.
wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that I disapprove of it. I'm just saying that the eutrophication of a body of water is a natural process.
But we've accelerated that by putting in the water.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but what my
It's an
worry is,
unnatural reaction to something that's a man-made problem
Right.
caused by,
Yeah, in this case, it's a man-made problem.
Right.
In this case, personally, I think Tenneco needs to step up.
right, but let's just stay with this one section a second. What I'm trying to get to is, my concern is any agency would say, well, this is a natural process, so dredging may not be appropriate. And I keep wanting to, in the plan, whoever reads this plan or whatever agency reads it understands, it's almost hammered in that this is caused not by a natural, this is like death by being shot at rather than death from old age.
right. Well, I mean, can we add in something to the effect of, and to prevent infill that is caused by
Man-made project.
man-made
Yeah, the
projects in the
man-made
past? Something like
project.
that?
I don't know, something, we can think about it, but I really think
And
it's
we can-
important. There's nowhere really in this body of the lake management plan that I see, maybe I overlooked it, where we talk about this crisis of a man-made crisis to the long-term health of the lake and its impact to the community. That's all.
It is in there that the Tenneco, the pipelines are there, because I had a question about the language.
All
But
right.
I think maybe it wouldn't hurt to call them out again.
Okay, yeah.
They
You know, it's
did
like-
this, and we are reaping the consequences.
Yeah, I think, and that's why we need to restore the island down the outlet, and it's the long-term health of the lake is involved. For however you want to. All right, so that's pretty much, I had another thing, but basically, it's more of the same of what I just mentioned on page 46, but that's pretty much the issues that I had. Maybe I look at it from a different point of view. Mine is that when an agency reads this, I want them to understand that we are working to restore this. So important. The most important is to restore the long-term health of the lake, and everything else we can work on. If we don't restore the long-term health, all the other issues will be mute 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Well, one thing I think we need to think about when we're talking about the dredging is the improved flow of
Right.
the outlet. And the improved flow of the outlet, we talk about anoxia throughout the entire document.
Yep.
And improved flow, increased flow out of the lake will also improve the oxygenation. And I think that that's something that we need to be sure that we're talking about.
I don't understand how there's improved flow when there's a impoundment. I mean,
Well, it's a problem. You know, but
I mean, the impoundment's here and the water goes over the impoundment and, you know, I mean, I think it's got to be deeper to keep the water cooler, which is the climate issue. That was my point.
Yeah.
But improved flow, if someone, I don't know that.
I think
Water.
improved flow will have an impact.
Yeah, okay.
What it is that the water at a lower level is going to be moving at a slower pace and the sediment drops out much easier rather than flowing out. And that's what the problem has been for the last 50 or 60.
Sediment does flow out or doesn't flow out?
It doesn't flow.
Yeah, I know.
It slows it down and the sediment tends to drop out and build up the bottom.
You know, the other thing,
How are we going to improve flow by just digging it deeper? I mean,
You're going to clear it out so that there's.
yeah,
there's
then
more
we'll
room
resilt
for
in
water.
50 years left. We'll do it again, but yeah.
Well, lots of things are like that, Patrick.
I know. It's like just.
Once every 50 years, you
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
do something.
Yeah.
Once every 100
No,
years.
I'm not saying we should do it. I'm just saying like, yeah.
Okay. And I agree with you, Sally. I mean, I think, and that's the other thing to point out is that they left this in here. There is mention of the flow. And they're the experts, GZA are the experts, and they didn't take it out. They didn't say, well, wait a minute, you can't talk about that improving flow. So I'm presuming they agree.
I mean, water still does flow, even though the impoundment is there.
one of the, Sally,
It's got momentum because it's moving. It's gonna take the silt with it.
Right.
And maybe we'll find out that it's gonna back up behind the impoundment more than it did before. I don't know.
Right.
But I do think that a long-term goal needs to be to do something about that pipeline.
Yeah.
However that happens.
Sally, let me ask you a question. Do you think, or everybody, like if that becomes boggish or the silt becomes too high, the water needs somewhere to go. Will it go up the banks of to people's homes? Will it go places that we really don't know where it's going to go?
Well, we also have the dam, don't forget. I mean, the dam is artificial.
Right.
So we have a couple issues down in the outlet. One, the first and worst being the pipeline.
Right.
But then we also have the dam, which is a fixed unit and has limitations as to what it can do.
All right. Anyway, my overall thing was also that I thought in the table of contents, the beginning, I would have liked, for ease of somebody reading this, is sort of like, what's the plan? If this is a lake management plan, but I would have liked to have seen like, basically what we're going to do is in the goals, water quality goals is basically, but is there ability to, like, where people go, what's the plan? What is it? You know, what are we doing? What are we, but it may be in there in some way, but it just seems to be more hidden.
Well, it is a technical document,
Yeah,
so,
okay.
you know, it's assumed, and there's probably
I look
plenty
at
of
things
Conservation Commission documents that people have a hard time reading as well. I
But
think
Sally
the goal is
brings
to
up
make
a
it
good
as
point.
clear as possible for the public, so that when people read it, they have a chance of understanding it. But it is meant to be, basically, it's a technical document. You've got a lot of technical reports in here. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for their input and point out, Michael, you should never feel like your point of view. It's good that it's different. That's why we have a diverse group here, so that we get different points of view and we can incorporate it and we can talk about these things. So, you know, I want to thank everybody, especially you, because like you are like the chief editor here. Sally, you're really good at it. So
Make everybody crazy.
not really.
Doing with that.
Make my life a lot easier. Otherwise, I'm the one doing all that. So it's great because then it gives me time to deal with like the nuts and bolts of putting this back together and then sending it out and taking the time to make the phone calls. So I appreciate it. Anyway,
Roxanne?
yeah, Pat?
Yeah, I just had a suggestion, in terms of the things we've been talking about, and the word we were searching for was acronym before.
Acronyms, thank you, Pat.
You're welcome. But my thought is consistency for sure, but maybe at the end of the document, we should have a glossary of terms and
Yeah.
a definition of acronyms. So if people are confused, on page 50 because it was defined on page 2, they
Yep.
could just flip to the back of it and see a glossary of terms or a definition of acronyms.
That's a
Yep,
good idea.
Excellent idea.
yes.
Okay, that's all I had.
Thanks, Pat.
Make a motion, we add a glossary
Yeah.
and maybe adjourn.
Well, does anybody have anything to report? Let's see, I don't see Jim Willis here at this point. And Mike is not here. John?
And nothing to report.
Okay, and Michael Nathan, anything to report from the SBA that we haven't talked about? Okay, Patrick?
I have a 12-point report with 3 parts in each point, but I can hold it for the next meeting.
You are so predictable. Gary? Nothing. And Sally?
I said mine.
Okay, and I have nothing either, so I move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.